I'll paraphrase this military story for you, converting it into flowing paragraphs without headings. Staff Sergeant Savannah Rivera gripped her M249 saw tightly as her squad moved through landscape that resembled shattered glass strewn across the earth. Sharp crystalline rocks protruded at unnatural angles, crevasses materialized unexpectedly, and a persistent low-frequency vibration permeated everything, felt more through bone than heard through ears. Specialist Jordan Hayes, serving as Rivera's assistant gunner, muttered his unease while adjusting the ammunition belts draped over his shoulders. Rivera responded dryly while surveying the broken horizon through her iron sights, noting that her rifle's optical systems had failed the instant they entered the wasteland, along with all other electronic equipment the team carried. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves, commanding the mission, suddenly raised her fist in the halt signal, and then chaos erupted as gunfire tore through the air. The ambush demonstrated flawless execution, with enemy positions elevated on three flanks creating overlapping kill zones that covered every possible route.
Yes, ma'am, I've got your 6.
Someone had been observing their approach, waiting for the precise moment when the team would be most vulnerable in the constricted passage between crystalline cliff faces. Reeves collapsed during the initial barrage, and Rivera watched her commander fall, blood spreading across her tactical vest as she hit the ground in the open 30 meters ahead with absolutely no protection between her position and the hostile forces. Someone's panicked voice announced the commander was down, but Rivera was already in motion. The fractured wasteland had consumed 3 reconnaissance units over the previous 18 months. The environment itself posed deadly threats through shifting rock formations, unstable footing, and atmospheric conditions that impaired both breathing and cognitive function. Now they faced an adversary of indeterminate strength exploiting the surreal geography to their benefit. Standard tactical doctrine declared any rescue attempt tantamount to suicide. Combat experience suggested Rivera would never reach Reeves alive. Rules of engagement prioritized preserving the team above individual rescue.
Yes, ma'am, I've got
Rivera
your 6.
charged into the exposed area regardless, her M249 saw thundering defiance as 23 pounds of belt-fed automatic weaponry transformed desperation into suppressive fire. The events of the subsequent 42 minutes would receive classifications so restricted that most military personnel would remain ignorant of their occurrence. However, what could not be concealed, what would circulate through special operations networks and become whispered legend, was how a 28-year-old staff sergeant from East Los Angeles entered a geological impossibility, refused to abandon her commander, and survived using methods that defied conventional wisdom against terrain that violated natural laws. This account details the fractured wasteland extraction and begins with a soldier who considered impossible merely another challenge requiring greater effort. 96 hours prior, the briefing occurred in a facility buried so profoundly underground that elevator descent required 3 minutes. The chamber contained no windows or distinguishing features, only harsh LED illumination and a holographic projection displaying terrain that provoked discomfort merely from observation. The presenter identified himself as Director Chen, offering no given name or organizational affiliation, only unmistakable authority. He began describing the fractured wasteland, and the holographic display revealed a region appearing to shift and distort even within the imagery, encompassing approximately 40 square miles of geological impossibility where 3 national boundaries converged with none accepting responsibility. The area had formed 23 years earlier through seismic activity that geologists still could not explain. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves, seated in the front row with the bearing characteristic of 2 decades in special operations, examined the distorted imagery carefully. At 41, she had established herself as one of Joint Special Operations Command's most respected field commanders with a reputation for returning her personnel safely. She inquired about the strategic significance, and Director Chen explained that the value had remained unknown until recently.
Follow my lead. Yes,
the terrain proved hostile and unstable, appearing to cause equipment failures through some combination of magnetic disturbances and mineral deposits not fully understood. However, 3 weeks earlier, they had detected unusual activity including heat signatures, electronic emissions, and evidence of organized human presence. Savannah Rivera, positioned 2 rows back while performing maintenance on her disassembled M249 SAW, questioned how they detected anything if equipment malfunctioned within the area.
Stay sharp. Follow my lead.
Chen explained brief windows when atmospheric conditions permitted partial satellite coverage had allowed them to assemble fragmented intelligence suggesting a facility had been constructed inside the wasteland. The purpose remained unknown, the operators unidentified, but analysis indicated possibly a clandestine detention center or research installation. Captain Michael Santos, serving as the team's intelligence officer, leaned forward asking whose facility it was. Chen responded that discovering this constituted their mission. They
Stay
had a
sharp.
narrow
Follow my
insertion
lead.
window,
Yes,
with
ma'am,
weather
I've got your
patterns
6.
suggesting a
Let's move.
36-hour
Right behind you.
period of relative stability beginning in 4 days. They would enter, collect intelligence on the facility, and extract before conditions deteriorated. Sergeant First Class Patricia Kamani, the team's medic, repeated the phrase relative stability with skepticism evident in her Kenyan accent, asking what that meant precisely. Chen clarified it meant the ground probably would not open beneath them and magnetic interference would only be severe rather than total.
Stay
He
sharp.
displayed
Follow my
casualty
lead.
reports
Yes,
showing
ma'am, I've
3
got your
teams
6.
had attempted
Let's move.
reconnaissance
Right
of the
behind you.
wasteland over the past 18 months. The first team was lost with all members, the second extracted with 3 survivors from 8 all suffering psychological trauma, and the third declared the mission impossible and refused to proceed beyond the outer perimeter. Reeves stated flatly they were being sent anyway, and Chen confirmed they were being deployed because they represented the best available and the intelligence value justified the risk. If the facility matched their suspicions as either a prison holding
sharp.
high-value
Follow my lead.
detainees or a
Yes,
research
ma'am, I've
site
got your
developing
6.
weapon
Let's
systems,
move.
they
Right
needed
behind you.
confirmation. Following the briefing, Savannah reassembled her weapon with focused precision born from thousands of repetitions. The M249 SAW served as her constant companion, belt-fed and capable of sustained automatic fire, reliable in ways that earned her trust more than most people. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves approached, observing Savannah's methodical work and noting she had reviewed her file showing 3 deployments and distinguished service in Kandahar when her
Stay
convoy
sharp.
was
Follow my
ambushed
lead.
and she used
Yes,
that
ma'am,
SAW
I've
to
got your
hold off
6.
approximately
Let's move.
40
Right behind
insurgents
you.
while casualties were evacuated, earning a Silver Star. Savannah confirmed she did what needed doing, and Reeves explained this mission would require much of what needs doing. Once they entered the wasteland, they would be isolated without communications. With command, no air support, and no extraction unless they walked themselves out, and the terrain itself actively hostile. She needed assurance Savannah was prepared for that. Savannah secured the
Stay
feed
sharp.
tray cover
Follow my
with a
lead.
decisive
Yes,
click
ma'am,
and
I've got your
replied she
6.
grew up in
Let's
East
move.
Los
Right
Angeles
behind you.
during the 90s, learning early that sometimes you are alone with an environment wanting you dead with only yourself and the people beside you, describing this as just a different neighborhood. Reeves smiled slightly, saying she appreciated that perspective, and instructed her to brief her assistant gunner as they would insert in 72 hours. The team comprised 8 operators including Reeves as mission commander, Santos handling intelligence and tactical planning, Kamani as medic, Specialist
sharp.
Jordan
Follow
Hayes
my
as
lead.
Savannah's
Yes,
assistant
ma'am,
gunner
I've got your
described
6.
as a lanky
Let's
young
move.
man from
Right behind
Idaho
you.
who could carry ammunition as though built for it, Master Sergeant Victor Okonkwo on demolitions and heavy weapons who was a Nigerian immigrant having earned citizenship through military service and reputation through expertise, Staff Sergeant Rachel Cohen on communications though her utility in the fractured wasteland remained questionable, and Corporal Twins Alex and Morgan Chen, unrelated to Director Chen, both specialists in hostile terrain operations who moved with synchronized efficiency only siblings could achieve.
Stay sharp. Follow my
They
lead.
staged from a
Yes,
forward
ma'am, I've got your
operating base
6.
in northern
Let's move.
Pakistan
Right
where
behind you.
mountain air was thin and locals maintained distance. Insertion would occur via helicopter to a landing zone 5 kilometers from the wasteland's boundary, then movement on foot into terrain that had killed or broken everyone attempting to map it. Simple was a concept that perished the moment they observed the fractured wasteland from the air. The terrain resembled a reality malfunction with massive crystalline formations jutting from Earth at angles defying gravity. The ground itself
Stay
appeared
sharp.
fractured
Follow my
with
lead.
cracks and
Yes,
fissures
ma'am, I've
running
got
in
your 6.
geometric patterns
Let's move.
suggesting
Right behind you.
intelligence behind the destruction, and everywhere that strange prismatic effect as though light was bending incorrectly. Hayes breathed an expletive noting the unnaturalness, and Okonkwo replied while checking his demolitions kit that the question was whether it represented a natural anomaly or something artificial. The helicopters deposited them at 03:15 hours in a narrow valley at the wasteland's edge. The moment the team disembarked, they sensed it, a pressure change unrelated to
Stay
altitude,
sharp.
a
Follow my lead.
low-frequency
Yes, ma'am,
vibration
I've got
making
your
their
6.
gear rattle
Let's move.
softly,
Right
and an
behind you.
oppressive sense of wrongness triggering Savannah's combat instincts. Reeves ordered an electronics check quietly, and results were immediate and total. Night vision dead, GPS displaying impossible coordinates, radios producing only static, rifle optics flickering then failing. They were reduced to iron sights, paper maps, and mechanical compasses that spun erratically. Santos muttered about welcoming the past while extracting an actual paper map
Stay
and
sharp.
orienteering
Follow my
compass,
lead.
noting
Yes,
they
ma'am,
were
I've got your
approximately
6.
5
Let's
clicks
move.
from the
Right behind
intelligence
you.
indicated facility location but given everything else about this place, assumed that was optimistic. Reeves decided on standard patrol formation with Alex and Morgan on point using their terrain expertise, everyone else staying alert and together because this place already felt hostile. She was not wrong. As they crossed the invisible boundary into the fractured wasteland proper, Savannah felt reality shift subtly around them. The air grew thick and harder to breathe, sounds echoed incorrectly with footsteps seeming to originate from wrong directions and voices bouncing off non-existent surfaces, and the light bent around. Crystalline formations in ways making distance judgment impossible. Cohen said quietly this was disorienting as her communications equipment became completely dead weight in her pack, her inner ear indicating they were ascending while her eyes suggested descent. Reeves replied to trust instruments when possible and trust the team when not, instructing them to keep moving. 2 hours into movement, they discovered the first body.
Stay sharp.
It was
Follow my
fresh,
lead.
perhaps
Yes, ma'am,
3
I've
days
got your
old,
6.
wearing
Let's
tactical
move.
gear
Right behind
similar
you.
to theirs but lacking identifying patches. The cause of death was immediately apparent as the crystalline rock formation had somehow grown through the body, impaling it from below, the victim's expression frozen in confused horror. Kamani said examining the body that this was impossible as crystal growth required years or decades, yet this happened in seconds. Alex Chen observed the wasteland did not care about what was possible, instructing them to look at the crystalline formations
Stay
as some
sharp.
were growing
Follow my
in real
lead.
time,
Yes, ma'am,
slowly
I've got
but
your
visibly.
6. Let's move.
Morgan
Right
Chen
behind you.
nodded agreement, being the quieter twin, stating they needed to watch where they stepped because if the ground was unstable enough for rapid crystal growth, they could be standing on a death trap. They continued moving with extreme caution as the terrain became increasingly surreal with canyons twisting in non-Euclidean angles, plateaus appearing to float slightly above ground, and everywhere those crystalline formations growing in patterns suggesting structure behind the chaos. 4 hours in,
Stay
they
sharp.
located the
Follow my
facility
lead.
built directly
Yes, ma'am,
into
I've
a
got your
massive
6.
cliff face
Let's move.
with concrete
Right
and
behind you.
steel integrated with the natural or unnatural rock formations. No visible guards, no external security, just a heavy blast door set into stone and what appeared to be ventilation systems venting air that shimmered with heat distortion. Santos confirmed this was their target and intel was accurate for once. Okonkwo observed it was too quiet and a facility in hostile territory should have external security. Hayes suggested maybe they were relying on the terrain
Stay
to
sharp.
kill anyone
Follow
who
my
got
lead.
close,
Yes,
or
ma'am, I've got
Savannah
your
said
6.
maybe they were
Let's
inside
move. Right
waiting,
behind you.
stating either way they needed intelligence and asking Santos for the play. Before anyone could answer, the ambush struck. Gunfire erupted from elevated positions they had not seen, concealed firing points built into the cliff face itself. The team scattered seeking cover among crystalline formations as rounds cracked through the air. Alex Chen shouted contact from high positions with multiple locations while returning fire. Savannah opened up with her saw
Stay
using
sharp.
controlled
Follow my
bursts
lead.
toward
Yes,
muzzle
ma'am, I've got
flashes,
your 6.
her tracer
Let's
rounds
move.
illuminating
Right behind you.
firing positions and giving teammates something to aim at. Beside her, Hayes was already feeding the next belt, keeping her weapon running. The firefight was brief but intense as the enemy had position and concealment, but Savannah's automatic fire forced them to keep heads down. After 30 seconds the shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Reeves called for status from behind a crystal formation, and Alex reported Morgan was hit with a shoulder wound through and through. Morgan
Stay sharp.
insisted
Follow
she
my
was
lead.
functional though
Yes,
blood
ma'am, I've
soaked
got
her
your 6.
uniform,
Let's
and
move.
Kamani was
Right
already
behind you.
moving to treat her. Okonkwo assessed they had been probed to test response then withdrew, indicating professional tactics, meaning they knew the team was present and were planning something. Reeves said they would move on the facility now before reinforcement or better ambush preparation. The blast door was sealed with a mechanical lock system without electronics to hack, just old-fashioned tumblers and steel. Okonkwo studied it briefly then extracted a shaped charge, and Cohen
Stay sharp.
commented on
Follow my lead.
the
Yes,
subtlety
ma'am, I've got
while
your 6.
Okonkwo replied
Let's move.
subtlety
Right
got
behind
shot
you.
at and now they were being direct. The explosion blew the door off its hinges sending it crashing inward, and the team flowed in immediately with weapons up, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. The interior was surprisingly well maintained with LED lights running on local generators, air conditioning maintaining comfortable temperature, and corridors resembling a research facility more than a prison. However, something was wrong about it all, as though the facility existed slightly
Stay
out
sharp.
of phase
Follow
with
my
normal
lead.
reality.
Yes, ma'am, I've got your 6.
Reeves decided
Let's move.
spreading
Right
out was
behind
bad tactics and they would stay together clearing systematically, asking Santos what his intelligence suggested regarding facility type, detention or research, with Santos replying maybe both. They moved deeper clearing room after room, most empty but finding evidence of recent occupation including still warm coffee, computers hastily powered down, and documents scattered as if someone left hurriedly. Cohen said they evacuated probably when they detected the team's approach,
Stay
or
sharp.
Savannah
Follow
countered
my
they were
lead.
being herded
Yes,
as
ma'am,
this
I've got
felt
your
like a
6.
trap.
Let's move.
The
Right
floor
behind you.
beneath them exploded, not an actual explosion but crystalline rock simply erupting upward with terrifying speed as spears of crystals shot up through the floor as though the facility was being consumed by the geological anomaly outside. The team scattered, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow corridor. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves was caught directly above one of the crystal spears, which punched through her right leg then her left side, impaling her against the ceiling. She screamed in pure agony, and Santos shouted for the commander while already moving, trying to reach her, but more crystals erupted, cutting off access. The facility was transforming around them as the fractured wasteland's impossible geology overtook the artificial structure. Okonkwo ordered fallback, saying the whole place was coming down, and Savannah roared they were not leaving her while looking desperately for a way to reach Reeves. The lieutenant colonel was impaled 3 meters above the floor with blood streaming down the crystal spear, her face pale with shock and pain. Alex Chen shouted that Rivera and structural integrity was failing, and if they did not move now, and Savannah replied then they move while she got Reeves down. She turned to Okonkwo asking his demolitions expert if he could shatter that crystal. He replied maybe with a small shaped charge and very precise placement, but he would have to get directly under her to position it, and the floor was still active. Savannah said do it. The floor was a maze of crystal spears now, with some still growing and others stable. Savannah and Okonkwo navigated through them like an obstacle course, with each step carefully placed, and above them Reeves was fading with her blood loss critical.
Let's move. Right behind
Savannah
you.
called up to stay with them as they were coming, and Okonkwo positioned himself directly beneath Reeves, studying the crystal spear that had impaled her. He said this was going to be tight as the charge needed to shatter the crystal without sending shrapnel into her, needing maybe 90 seconds to place it precisely. Savannah replied he had 60 while scanning the corridor, where more crystals were erupting randomly and the facility's structural supports were groaning under strain. After that, this whole section collapses.
Stay sharp. Follow my lead.
Okonkwo worked
Yes,
with
ma'am,
desperate
I've got your
speed,
6.
his
Let's
demolitions
move. Right behind
expertise
you.
letting him shape and position the charge with precision resembling art. Behind them, the rest of the team was laying down covering fire as enemy combatants appeared, security forces wearing hazmat-style gear clearly adapted to operating in the facility's hostile environment. Hayes shouted for Savannah about contact from the rear while sending her ammunition belts forward, and her saw hammered out return fire. She fired short controlled bursts, suppressing the enemy advance without wasting ammunition,
sharp.
as every
Follow my
round
lead.
counted now.
Yes, ma'am, I've got your 6.
They were deep in
Let's
hostile
move.
territory
Right behind
in
you.
a facility being consumed by impossible geology while trying to save their commander from an injury that should have been fatal. Okonkwo announced charge set and fire in the hole. The shaped charge detonated with a sharp crack and the crystal spear shattered exactly as designed. Reeves dropped and Savannah caught her, taking the impact and cushioning her fall. Savannah said she had her and to stay with her, but Reeves's eyes were unfocused and her breathing shallow as the crystal had punched through her femoral artery and she was bleeding out.
Yes, ma'am,
Reeves gasped for Rivera to get the team out as in order, and Savannah replied respectfully for her to shut up and let the medic work, turning to Kamani, who was already there with her medical kit, and asking if she could save her. Kamani replied she could try but not here, needing to move to a stable location and requiring at least 5 minutes of uninterrupted work. Savannah said then they find a stable location and buy her 5 minutes. The team formed a defensive perimeter around Kamani as she worked desperately to save Reeves while the facility collapsed in sections, with entire corridors being overtaken by crystal growth, walls cracking, and ceilings threatening to cave in. Through it all, the enemy forces kept coming, trying to contain or eliminate the American team. Santos took a round to his vest, knocking him down but not out. Cohen was hit in the leg, still fighting but immobile, and the Chen twins moved with synchronized precision, covering each other's movements and angles with coordination only family could achieve. Kamani finally announced she had Reeves stabilized, but she needed immediate evacuation with maybe 2 hours before organ failure.
Yes, ma'am, I've got your 6.
Savannah said then they moved now and turned to Okonkwo and Santos, saying they needed an exit route fast. Santos reported the way they came was blocked by crystal growth, sealing it off, and Savannah said then they find another way, as this facility had to have emergency exits. They moved through the collapsing structure, carrying Reeves between them, fighting running battles with enemy security forces who seemed determined to prevent their escape. The fighting was close quarters and desperate, room to room and corridor to corridor, with the facility itself becoming increasingly hostile. Morgan Chen, despite her wounded shoulder, pointed to a blast door marked with emergency evacuation symbols, saying that had to lead out. The door was locked and Okonkwo did not bother with finesse, blowing it open with explosives. Beyond lay a tunnel roughly carved through rock, leading upward toward what they hoped was the surface. Savannah ordered them to move while providing rear security as her team evacuated through the tunnel, Hayes staying with her and feeding ammunition as she laid down, covering fire against pursuing security forces.
Yes, ma'am,
the tunnel climbed steeply, eventually opening onto a ledge high on the cliff face where they emerged into late afternoon light. Real sunlight though filtered through the prismatic effects of the fractured wasteland's atmosphere. Alex Chen assessed they were out of the facility but still in the wasteland at least 3 clicks from the boundary, and Savannah noted looking back at the tunnel entrance where enemy forces would emerge any moment that they were being pursued. Cohen said suddenly about extraction while checking a radio, saying her radio was working as they were at high enough elevation the magnetic interference was reduced and she was getting intermittent signal. Reeves gasped from her makeshift stretcher to call it in for emergency extraction at these coordinates. Cohen worked her radio desperately, calling any station identifying as Viper 7 requesting emergency extraction with critical casualties under fire, reading off their position coordinates. Static preceded a voice confirming as Overwatch asking to confirm critical casualties. Cohen confirmed Commander critical with multiple team members wounded needing immediate extraction.
Follow my lead.
The voice copied saying extraction birds were spinning up with ETA 22 minutes to their position, asking if they could hold. Savannah looked at her team of 8 operators now down to 7 functional fighters with Reeves critical, Morgan wounded, Cohen immobile, low on ammunition, and enemy forces incoming, considering holding for 22 minutes. She replied affirmative, they can hold. What followed was the longest 22 minutes of Savannah's military career as enemy forces emerged from the tunnel and immediately engaged.
Stay sharp.
The team had taken a defensive position among the crystalline formations, using the impossible terrain to their advantage for once, with Savannah positioning her M249 SAW to cover the primary approach with her fields of fire overlapping with Okonkwo's position while Santos and the Chen twins covered the flanks. Kamani stayed with Reeves continuously treating her to keep her alive, and Cohen coordinated with extraction forces. The enemy came in waves, professional and coordinated, but they were attacking uphill across open ground against a desperate team with nowhere to retreat.
Stay sharp. Follow my lead.
Savannah's SAW became the anchor of the defense with her sustained automatic fire breaking up enemy advances before they could gain momentum. Hayes kept her fed with ammunition, anticipating every reload and keeping the weapon running smoothly despite harsh conditions, but the ammunition was finite. After 15 minutes, Savannah was down to her last belt with 200 rounds between survival and being overrun. She shouted to Santos she was almost dry and the next assault might break through. Santos replied, then they make sure there is no next assault, his tactical mind working despite his injuries, asking Okonkwo how much explosive he had left. Okonkwo replied 2 charges, asking why, and Santos indicated the tunnel they were using, asking if he could collapse it. Okonkwo studied the approach, calculating angles and structural weakness, saying maybe, but he would have to get close, very close, 30 meters from the tunnel entrance. Savannah said immediately she would cover him, and Okonkwo protested she would be completely exposed and they would tear her apart. Savannah replied then she would have to make them keep their heads down, instructing him to move when she started firing. She stood up, lifting her SAW and opened fire, not controlled bursts this time but sustained continuous fire that emptied her remaining ammunition in one long defiant stream. The enemy advance faltered under the onslaught, with everyone seeking cover as 750 rounds per minute turned the air into a metal storm. Okonkwo ran, crossing the distance in seconds, placing his charges with expertise born of years of practice and arming them. He screamed fire in the hole while sprinting back toward the defensive position, and Savannah's weapon clicked empty as she had given everything she had. The charges detonated, bringing down the tunnel entrance in a cascade of rock and crystal, sealing the enemy's primary approach and cutting off their reinforcements. The remaining enemy forces, seeing their position suddenly untenable, began withdrawing. The firefight did not end cleanly, with still sporadic exchanges of fire, but the main assault broke. Cohen announced extraction inbound 2 minutes, and there they were, 2 Blackhawks coming in low and fast with their approach vectoring directly toward the team's position. Door gunners opened up, suppressing the remaining enemy forces with devastating effect. The helicopters flared for landing, and the team began loading their wounded, with Reeves first, still barely conscious, Morgan next with her shoulder wound worse than she had admitted, Cohen limping but determined, and Santos nursing broken ribs under a shattered vest. Savannah was last aboard with her empty SAW cradled in her arms, her eyes scanning the terrain until everyone else was safe. Only when the helicopter began to lift did she allow herself to collapse into a seat as exhaustion finally claimed her. As the fractured wasteland fell away beneath them, Reeves, strapped to a stretcher and receiving fluid transfusions, caught Savannah's eye, saying with voice weak but clear that she saved her life and risked everything to get her down. Savannah replied that Reeves would have done the same for any of them, and Reeves said maybe, but Savannah was the one who actually did it, her eyes struggling to focus as she said Savannah held that line and kept them alive. Savannah replied that is what leaders do, and she was just a staff sergeant with a machine gun.
Let's move.
Reeves responded no, she was something more than that and everyone there knew it. The debriefing took weeks as Savannah sat through countless interviews with intelligence officers trying to understand what they had encountered in the fractured wasteland. The facility they had infiltrated was apparently part of an unauthorized research program with multiple nations cooperating in secret to study the geological anomalies and develop weaponized applications. The helmet camera footage showed crystalline formations growing with impossible speed, physics that bent in ways that made scientists uncomfortable, and combat tactics that would be studied for years. Most of it was immediately classified above top secret, but what could not be hidden was what Savannah had done. Running into the kill zone when Reeves was impaled, holding the defensive position against overwhelming odds, and expending her last ammunition to cover Okonkwo's demolitions run. 8 weeks later she stood in dress uniform receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration, with Lieutenant Colonel Reeves recovered enough to attend with a cane and personally present the medal.
Right behind you.
Reeves said quietly as she pinned the medal that the fractured wasteland extraction was what they were calling it and Savannah's name was attached to it forever now. Savannah replied she could live with that as everyone made it home alive and that was what mattered. Reeves said not just alive but functional and ready to fight another day, calling that extraordinary, pausing to explain she had put in paperwork for Savannah's promotion to Sergeant First Class and recommended her for advanced leadership training, saying Savannah had the instincts of a commander and the Army needed more leaders like her.
Let's move. Right behind
Later
you.
when the ceremony ended, Savannah found a quiet moment to clean her M249 SAW, the weapon having saved her life and her team's lives more times than she could count in the fractured wasteland. Hayes found her in the armory thanking her quietly for everything, for not leaving the colonel and for holding that line when they were almost overrun. Savannah replied they were a team and that was what teams do, but Hayes insisted what she did charging in to save Reeves and fighting with an empty weapon to cover Okonkwo was something else.
I've got your 6.
Savannah looked at her weapon considering before saying what she learned in the fractured wasteland was that terrain does not matter, technology fails, and all the advanced gear in the world can die in an instant, but training endures, determination persists, and the decision to never abandon your people works anywhere against any obstacle in any conditions. She finished cleaning her saw, the familiar weight grounding her, and continued saying the wasteland tried to kill them with impossible geology and overwhelming force but made one critical mistake by underestimating soldiers who refused to quit, and that was something no amount of hostile terrain or superior numbers could overcome. 3 months later Savannah Rivera returned to the field as Sergeant First Class ready for the next impossible mission, because that was what she did and what they all did, walking into the hard places and bringing each other home every single time.